Jon Meacham is not only the author of American Lion, he is also the editor of Newsweek magazine. So, Mr. Meacham, is there a current politician that when you think of Andrew Jackson, you can compare to a contemporary politician?
There's a lot of Jackson in George W. Bush. There was a lot of Jackson in John McCain. Men who projected an image of strength and of determination and were more subtle politicians than people gave them credit for. And I think there are elements of Jackson in the Obama White House, in the sense that when Jackson got tired of his coverage in the newspaper, he founded his own. So it would be rather like, and every president dreams now of being able to do that. And I think the appropriate analogy is really the creation of a website, almost. And Obama has this constant conversation going with his supporters that I think every subsequent president now will have to match. And that's a Jacksonian idea, that people don't simply want to be called on every 4 years to vote. They want to be part of the ongoing story. They want to help pass legislation. They want to help stop legislation. And so I think we're very much living in a world, in a political world, where the Jacksonian tools are present, evident.
What about a Ron Paul?
What about a Ron Paul? That's a great question. I guess Paul, my sense of him, and I don't know him well, is he's working, if not outside the system, he's coming at it from a third way, a third angle. Jackson was a much more practical. My sense is that Jackson is a much more practically minded politician, and yeah.
Okay. This is the cover of the book, American Lion, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. What was it like when you found out that you won the Pulitzer?
I was gobsmacked, as we say in the trade. I was in Sewanee, Tennessee, and my BlackBerry blew up. It was utterly unexpected and very humbling.
Well, we've got a lot of calls. A lot of people watched your presentation just a few minutes ago, and our first call up for Jon Meacham is Clearwater, Florida. Go ahead, Clearwater.
Hi, John. Just want to call and tell you how much I love reading The American Lion. You said you went to school at the University of South in Sewanee. Did you also teach at Macaulay Boys School in Chattanooga?
I did go to Macaulay School in Chattanooga.
You did go there, but you didn't teach there.
Oh, did I teach there? No, they would never have me. No, I did not. I left Sewanee. I went to work for the Chattanooga Times. Then I was at the Washington Monthly, and then I was at Newsweek. And so I've always been an ink-stained wretch.
Well, I love reading your book, and I enjoyed reading The American Gospel, too. I haven't gotten to read the other two, but I love reading your book.
Thank you so much.
Jon Meacham, you talked about Jackson being a lower D and a lower R, lower case Republican, lower case Democrat. Could you give us your definition of those two terms?
Sure. A Republican, lowercase r, is someone who believes in the essential Madisonian structure of the government, the idea that we have a system of checks and balances of interest, counteracting interest. As Madison put it in Federalist 51, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. And someone who believed that government was best when it governed least. That important instinct. Jefferson had that instinct. Presidents tend to have that instinct, except when they don't. You know, they always think, well, you know, we should stay out of it, but if I want to get into it, it's perfectly fine. So it's a believer in smaller government. It's a believer in the American system. A Democrat, lowercase d, democracy was a dirty word to many of the founders. Hamilton was horrified by it. Madison was too, to some extent. It was the idea that you would have the power would be more diffuse, that the people themselves would play a critical role in the life of the country as a direct agent, not necessarily just simply through Congress or the president. It was a sense of the will of the people needing to be a vital part of the exchange, not something that was sort of outside and being interpreted by existing institutions.
Durham, North Carolina, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mr. Meacham, I have long been an admirer of yours, and I especially love Newsweek because I think you hire wonderful writers. My question, sir, even though you made the comment about South Carolina, I actually lived in Columbia, South Carolina. If Andrew Jackson were alive today and if he were president, what would he say about the current state of affairs in South Carolina with maybe specific reference to our Representative Wilson, who made that audacious comment to President Obama during his address? What do you think President Jackson would have to say about South Carolina? And thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, I was simply, let me just say quickly to the state of South Carolina, I was just joking. And it's a noble state in many ways. I think that Jackson believed in the majesty of the presidency and believed very much in that office. He did not, we went from, Adams all the way to Wilson without presidents actually going to Capitol Hill to appear in that way, to give a State of the Union or give a speech. Jefferson was not a very good speaker, so he wasn't interested in it, so he started sending a written message, and it wasn't until Woodrow Wilson that presidents started coming back to the Hill. I think that Jackson would want there to be a vigorous and tough and to some extent bare-knuckled fight. I don't think it's not the fight that is at issue. It's the way in which it's conducted to some extent. But it's hard to play, we sometimes call this Star Trek history, where you beam a president back or forward to decide what they would do. My sense is he would believe in principled opposition and argument. He would not be thrilled about disrespect being paid to the office of the presidency.
Honolulu, aloha.
Yes, hello, Mr. Meacham. I'd like to ask if you, during the course of your research, if you came across any references to cinematic portrayals of Jackson in the films, if any of them came close to his real personality. Thank you.
It's funny, I didn't, and let me tell you why. I think when you're a biographer or you're a historian, cinema and theater are so powerful that they can lodge images and stories in your mind that are, that are invented, that are perfectly within the bounds of that art form, but can be hard to get out of your head. And so I didn't want to see any dramatization of Jackson, just for fear somehow or another it would move me from the impression I was getting from the papers of the time.
Next call from Mr. Meacham comes from Indianapolis. Indianapolis, you're on the air.
Hi, Mr. Meacham. My name is Debbie. And I just wanted to say that you mentioned that you can't judge a past character by the morals of today. Wouldn't the morals be the same if slavery and getting rid of Indians was bad then? Isn't it the same today? And if he's a champion of the little guy would have been the white little guy instead of blacks and Indians or whatever.
Yes, ma'am. But you're exactly right. The morality of the question, the morality of slavery, of Indian removal, is clear today. And it was clear to many, many people in real time then, which is why Jackson has to be held accountable for what he did. And it was the white little guy, yes. My argument, because many of these objections could be leveled at the founders as well, justly, instead of the founders, is that if we foreclose the possibility of learning from the past, both in a good and bad way, from real people who are as flawed and sinful and short-sighted as the rest of us, or at least as I am, I should say, then we really commit a kind of unilateral disarmament. We end up with a past that has to either be entirely perfect and airbrushed as a fable, or we end up with a caricature on the other side of, this is the evil stepmother sort of thing.